Alright, so if you saw the other video on the channel where I was changing out the fog lamp, which is also the angel eyes or halos for the LCI models, that's like a 2008 and younger, you'll see that I ran into a problem. And let me zoom in there and you can see right here, this is where the connector was that goes to it. I'll zoom down there and let you see. But you can see what happens is when that wire gets brittle on the insulation will crack. So if you're taking your bulbs out, say you got a angel eye went out or a fog lamp went out, and you twist it, make sure you look at the wires. I've taken the insulation off. It didn't look that bad when I did it, but it had cracks all in it. And so that's a sure sign that you're going to have issues. If those wires get together, they're going to short and they're going to be blowing fuses, and they're just going to cause you problems along the way. So we got to get this unit out. But unfortunately, what that involves is taking the bumper off for the most part in this car. And so you can do it without having to remove the whole bumper. You can just loosen up the bumper, and I'm actually not going to take it completely loose. I'm just going to pull it away so I can get access to pull this light module out. But that means I got to get this whole bumper, at least on this side, out. Now fortunately for my passenger side light, the wires were still good, so I was able to change the bulb in that, so I really don't have to take it off. But I don't like bending and flexing on this plastic, especially because it's got some age on it, being a 2008. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull it all forward and then take that light module out, and then we'll show how we rewire these right here. I got a pigtail coming in the mail, and we'll get that changed out, put it all back together, and we'll be in good shape again. So let's get set up to take the front off the car so we can get that light module out and get this problem resolved. Alright, so to get this front bumper cover off, you can see these bolts, so those got to come off, but there's a lot of hidden bolts that they hid away from us that we got to take some things off to get to. There's a couple on the front, there's probably some on the bottom that connect up to the rock shield, and then there's also a couple of fasteners right here, and then some inside of the inner fender. So we got to take the inner fender, we don't have to take it off, but we have to pull it back so we can access it. So for me, with a lift, it's just as easy to take the wheels off, so I got good easy access. If you didn't have a lift, you could always just turn your wheels one way or the other to access these and you can get to them. But it's just easier for me with the lift. So first thing I got to do is lift this up, and I've already got the bolts broke free, so I can lift it up and take the wheels off, and that'll give me some access. Alright, so to get the inner fender loose from the bumper cover, it's just a series of bolts. These are like 8mm, these are some stars, and then this is like a 10mm, and so we need to take all of those loose. Alright, so with all the bolts out of the way, and I opened that up just to kind of show you that this is where you would do your xenon lamp if you had to change it out. And also this is where we'll disconnect this connector right here. This is the main connector that goes to the bulb. If you can see it up there, we're going to disconnect that because it's a little easier to get to right here versus having to pull the lamp out. Alright, so now we got some access, so we can open this up. And if you're wondering where your water bottle was, there's your water bottle for your window washer. And so if you needed to fix that, you can fix that while you're at it. And then we can slide this guy down a little bit and get us some access to the inside of this. And there we go. So I'm just going to hold that right there. So that one screw right here is what holds this up, and then there's another one that goes upward that I'm actually missing. So that one is falling out on me, and so this whole unit is loose, so I got to put that screw back. But there's one more screw that goes right up inside of there that holds that up. Alright, so now we just got to go underneath and we take the screws loose. We'll go to the other side and we'll take the other wheel off, and then we'll be ready to start working on the front. so for this side you can see these are the screws right here that hold all that up. My wife bonked it on its nose and damaged it, so I had to put a little wire right there to cable that back up. But we got it in there. But you can see right here is one bolt and right here is the other bolt. So we got to take those two out. There's one. And the other one is way back here. A little more difficult to get to, but can be done. And there we go. So that should free up this whole side over here. And so now we just got to go down to the bottom and get rid of those clips that are holding it to the bottom right down here. So let's get underneath and see what's holding it down there. And then we'll work our way around to the front. Alright, so underneath the car, back here under the bottom of it, there's some screws down here, possibly, if they're still on the car, that hold some of this plastic together. So we'll take them off. And the same for this one. Like that. And then we just got to go over to the other side and do the same thing. And that's going to free up all of this plastic here. Alright, so with everything in the fender wells done and anybody under the bottom that was holding it on, now we got to get to the front. And there's a bolt behind here and a bolt behind there that hold this front attached. And it's kind of hidden, but if you look real close to your car, and this is an LCI, so this is a 2008. Before this, it's a little bit different. I think they're inside the fog lamps or something. But for this model, there's two little triangles, and what you do is put two screwdrivers into the little triangle right there, and then you just pry just a little bit, and then just take a screwdriver and just pop that little guy off. And so right there hides the screw that's holding this thing onto the front of the car. So we just got to do that for the other side, and then we can access those little screws right there. There we go. So that frees up the whole face of this thing. So now see it's all wiggly. And the only thing really holding it on there now is the screws that are up on top. So we need to get something underneath it so we can slide it out, so we can get that light out of there. So I'm going to go get me some boxes and I'll set it under it, because I'm just going to pull it forward and then we can get to that light. Alright, well, instead of boxes, I decided to use my little roll around chairs that used to be office chairs, and I got them out in the shop. And if you got old office chairs, they are great for having in the shop, because you can roll around on them and do all that, and they're pretty comfy. Plus, they raise up and down. So what I can use for this lightweight job here is just take the little office chair and just put it up under it, and then that way I can just roll it right out of it. So just got to get it good enough that it'll sit down on it when I take those bolts loose on the top, and then I can just slide it out and it'll sit on top of the office chair. So let's raise up and take the last bolts off the top, and then we'll slide this whole thing forward. Alright, so back up top, and all we got is all these little bolts to take off up here. So we just gotta pop these guys loose. And there we go. So unless there's any other random bolts anywhere, this thing ought to slide forward and give us enough room to get that light out. So we'll just walk it out with the office chairs. So that's as far as we need to really go, because now we got access over here to this light, and I can get to the bolt down at the bottom, bolt at the top, and then the bolts on the side. So I didn't have to disconnect anything attached to the bumper. I just needed to pull the bumper forward like that, and we got it. So now we're ready to look at taking that light module out right there and see if we can repair those wires. Alright, so there's not much that stands in our way to get this light module out. Only about 4 bolts. But before we do that, you remember this little flap that's up inside the inner fender? You can access the connector for the light right there. So all you do is squeeze on the bottom and squeeze on the top and get it to unlock. And you can see it's just right there. You just squeeze that little guy right there. on top and the bottom, and you can disconnect it. So now all we got to do is take the bolts off. So let's spin around here to the side, because the front three are real easy, but the one on the side you got to pay a little bit of attention to, or you'll mess up the alignment of your light. So let's swing around here. All right, so there's one on the side right up here on the outside of the fender well, and this one's kind of special because it does the alignment. So let me zoom in and show you, because what you want to do is make sure that you don't move the alignment for it, else it's going to throw your light out. So they gave us a little hex on the back side back here, and so you can take a wrench and hold it in position, and then when you take the bolt loose, you don't lose your position that way, because this thing adjusts in and out and it's going to change the angle. So we got that one real easy, and it's really the only one that you have to pay attention to. The rest of them are super simple. So let's scoot around to the front, take the other three out, and then we can pull this light module. Alright, so we only have 3 bolts remaining, so let me zoom in here to the light module and I'll show you where they are. So there's one on top right up here, it's a star. There's one right down in the bottom, and then there's one other one right over here. So we just got to take those 3 free and we'll be ready to pull it out. So one thing that's real helpful is if you have one of these little flexi things, they can be picked up off the web for just a few bucks. And they come with a 1/4 inch drive, and so it's like a flexi extension, and that's really handy for getting down on the inside of that bottom one. We'll use it for all of them just to make it easier on us. So let's get these bolts out and pull this guy out so we can look at the wiring. So all we're going to do is come in here and pop them, and they're not on there very hard, so even this flexible extension is going to get them. All I do is pop right at the beginning. So there's the upper. Just got to try to not drop the bolt. And there's that bottom one. This is the most difficult. And you can see we're getting wiggly. We only got one left, and it's right down here in the bottom down here. So we just flex in there and give it a pop. And there's the third one. So 3 bolts. That's all it takes once you get that side one, the special one, done. And we're ready to pull out the light module. So all we do is just slide him forward. Tons of room. You just have to negotiate him out of the wiring. And there we go. So there's our light module, and here's our problem. As you can see, that the 2 wires that went to the bulb had gotten so hot that all the insulation was cracking off. So I can't put it back in there because they come together right there, and they're going to touch, and it's going to short, and it's going to blow fuses, and then I'm going to be doing this anyway. So we're going to take it in the house in the air conditioning, and we're going to see about getting these wires replaced. Alright, so we got the light module in the house in the air conditioning so we can work in some comfort here. So what I got to do, I put the connector back on. I took it off out there just to see if I could get it off, but I put it back on. And so now what I got to do is get these 2 wires out, and they're held on with a little zip tie right there. But before I go messing with anything, since these wires were so fragile on their insulation, the other wires are probably just as fragile. So before I start messing with those other wires that haven't been touched and so they didn't break, I'm going to take some clear enamel, which is basically fingernail polish, and I'm going to paint a little bit on those guys right here just to give them a little bit of flexibility, because I'm really not in the mood to take this whole thing apart and have to try to rewire the entire thing. So if I can give those guys just a little bit of flexibility, it'll be enough that I can get that zip tie off there and not break them as well. So we'll get those little guys painted up. There we go. Well, that should provide me enough flexibility to not have them fractured. Alright, so we got our new pigtails, and they're not expensive, they're only a few dollars. These are ceramic, so I'm switching out to ceramic when these break. So all I got to do is wire this pigtail in, and I just got to wire it in the same configuration as this one is. So if I look at it that way, the red wire is the yellow wire, and the black wire is going to be the brown wire. So red to yellow, pretty easy to remember. All right, so here's where the tedious task comes in, is where we got to cut that little zip tie loose. So let's zoom down in there and see where we are. So right there's the zip tie, and what I want to do is cut that loose without disturbing those other wires and get these two wires separated, and then I'll put a zip tie back on there. So as carefully as you can, you got to take that zip tie loose. Right there. And then I'm going to see if I can get it opened up just enough that I can get my two wires out. And so then I'm just going to pull these out. And I don't want to have to chase these all the way back up to the connector. It may be that they're far enough away from the heat that they're still flexible out here. So I'm going to try to pull that out without breaking it, and then I'm going to put that back in there. So let me get that yellow one out and get the brown one out. So versus having to snip it and crimp it and do all that and risk damaging those wires even more, because like I say, if the insulation's not damaged, it's okay. But I'm going to solder it together, and then I'm going to use some shrink tubes, and we'll shrink that back together, and then we'll be in pretty good shape. So as carefully as we can, what we want to do is disconnect right here, and we're already exposed because of the damage to the insulation. So we just want to snip that off, and we want to snip the brown one. So we just got some resin on our zip tie, and we're going to put some resin on that wire, and what that does is get rid of the oxides when I heat it up. And so then we're going to tin those wires real quick. And what that does is get ready for me to be able to put my wires. So remember, we were red to yellow, and so I'm going to tin these the same and get them ready, and then all I got to do is just stick them together. Super simple that way versus having to fiddle around inside that little box getting some solder to stick it. So let's just set those up there, and we will tin them as well. So we are ready to go with the tinning. Now all we want to do is make sure to remember that we got to put our little shrinky tubies in. And so we're just going to slip those on the wire because we're going to shrink those down. So now all we got to do is get the wire up high enough that we can touch it with the solder, or in this case I'm just going to bend it down. That way I can just come in there and touch it, and when I touch the gun to it, it's going to connect. So do the same thing. We just dip that a little bit into resin, just makes life easier, so I don't have too much to worry about. And then we just do red to yellow. And see, having it pre-tinned makes it easy, because then the tin just comes together. And then we're going to do black to brown. And there we go. We got our wires connected back. So now let's just gingerly pull them out. And we're going to slip the shrink tubing over them. Alright, so we're soldered back together. So now we got to shrink our tubing down. If you had to get a regular lighter, it'd be difficult, but this little guy is a little torchy lighter, and so you can aim him, shrink that tubing down real fast. So we got our new pigtail put on. Now we just have to carefully get it back down here so we can zip tie it to that other one. So now I'm going to try to see if I can get this other zip tie inside of the hole where the old zip tie was. All doing this and avoiding too much movement to any of those wires. And there we go. So now these wires are not damaged. This is my new pigtail, and they're all tightened back up. So I can move the pigtail around and it doesn't impact those other wires. So there we go. We're set up for the future to not have any issues out of this pigtail. Alright, so now since we got all this out, we can go ahead and put the light bulb in, and it'll make it a lot easier. That way I don't have to do it in the car. So let me go get some gloves and we'll get this light bulb put in, and then we'll be ready to put the car back together. Alright, so we got our new bulb and we got a glove on so we don't get the bulb dirty. And we just lock her there. And there we go. So now we've got everything put in place. The bulb's locked in. All of those wires are still secure. We're all zip tied and heat shrunk. So we should be in good shape to put this thing back on the car. So let's get set up back outside and get everything reassembled, and then we'll test it out and see how it works. Alright, so the reassembly is just the opposite of the disassembly, but we'll show putting the light back in there and getting it lined back up underneath here. And also, if you were wondering, this is the driver for the xenon for the big bulb. So if you had your big bulb goes out or your ballast goes out, that's where that is. It's underneath. And so you would have to take this module out to do that. So put her back in. All we do is just slide it back in. Got our three. Now our light's back in place. All we got is this one over here. We just got to switch bits, and we got to remember to use our little wrench to hold that in place when we tighten that one down. That way it doesn't change our alignment. There we go. So our bulb is back in. So I'm going to reconnect the wire around back. Then we'll turn the key on and we'll see if we got lights. Alright, so here's the test. So with our light module reconnected, I'm just going to turn the lights on, and I'm going to make sure that my lights are working. And there we go. We're back in business. We got our halos back, and we got our light back. Well, alright, so now all I got to do is put the bumper back on, but I won't show that because it's just in the reverse order. I just got to put all the screws back in and button everything back up, and we'll be set up. So we'll show it at the end with it all put back together. After getting the wires all fixed back up, and if you want to see how to change the light bulbs out there in the video on the other channel where I initially ran into that problem. But now we're in good shape again. We got our bulbs changed and we got our lights working, so there we go. Now we're back to fog lamps and halos, and everything looks really good. Well, alrighty. Well, thanks for watching.